One of the premises of this channel is cities are heterogeneous. And by that I mean, every city you think of as having good urbanism has parts that aren't so good. And every city you think of as being unwalkable actually has extremely walkable neighborhoods. Well, today I'm focused on transit, and I wanted to answer the question, what are the cities that we think of as falling well short in this category, but actually have locations within them that have great access to transit? We're going to look at exactly these kinds of cities and dive into some specific locations that I think are going to surprise you, and it's all coming up next. This is CityNerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer-suggested topics always welcome, and then sometimes I just want to answer my own burning questions. And a lot of my questions these days are, with the cost of housing and the cost of living in general seeming to spiral further and further out of control, where can we find value in American cities? And in particular, value for people who want to minimize or eliminate altogether the cost of vehicle ownership. Keep in mind, this isn't just theoretical for me. I don't undertake these analyses as some kind of lark. I actually live this stuff. Part of the reason I chose to live in Albuquerque, New Mexico was housing costs were reasonable, and even though transit service citywide is pretty lacking, I knew I could find an affordable place with excellent access to ART, the city's BRT line. So the principle here is the entire city or metro area doesn't have to be accessible by transit for you to live a good quality of life. You just need connections to the places you want to go. So here's what I did. I'm using Transit Score as the baseline for a citywide rating, and then I'm looking for places within each city that have the highest differential between the location-specific Transit Score rating and the citywide one. Now, you may ask, what is Transit Score? Well, it comes from the same people who do Walk Score. And I'm not going to bore you by regurgitating the methodology here, but I'll leave a link down in the description, and the short version is, they incorporate characteristics like frequency, mode, and distance to the nearest stop to create a usefulness score for each route, and then they sum the routes and normalize to create an overall transit score. And for each city we're going to look at, I'll dig into local conditions so we can decide if it passes the smell test. The cities I looked at, the central cities of North American metro areas over 500,000. And I'll give you a top 10 in order of how big the differential between the citywide transit score rating and the location-specific transit score rating is. And there will be, of course, honorable and dishonorable mentions. So with that, let's get into it. Number 10, Raleigh, North Carolina, citywide transit score rating of 29, which puts it firmly in the some transit, a few nearby public transportation options category. The whole principle I'm operating off of, though, is that when you live in a city, you don't live in the whole city. You live in a particular location that has a very specific relationship with the urban environment and amenities like transit. So my recommendation for nearly all of these is, you live close into downtown, which is basically always the hub of the transit system. Now, I haven't vetted any of the apartments I'm about to show you, so this is not an endorsement, but if you happen to live at, say, the Edison Lofts on Davie Street, you're gonna have a transit score of 76, which is considered excellent. And a quick ground truthing will tell you you're a block away from the Go Raleigh station, which serves like 30 different bus routes, and you're walking distance to Raleigh Union Station. Also, definitely a city I'd like to get to in the next year if I can. 9. San Antonio, Texas, citywide transit score of 31. And yes, if you drop a pin on a random location within the San Antonio city limits, you are probably going to have suboptimal transit access. But that's not really my approach. What I did was a little more labor intensive. I went apartment hunting and pasted street addresses into the WalkScore search engine. And in this case, what I got was the Floodgate, which scores an 80. By the way, I love residential marketing. Boutique living in the heart of San Antonio, inspiring an elevated metropolitan experience. Man, I feel so classy. Look, I didn't say I was going to find you reasonably priced places. You're on your own for that. I'm just saying, this is going to put you right in the heart of San Antonio's transit system, VIA, with access to tons of routes, and some of them actually have decent frequencies. Walk score is 98 though, so maybe you don't even take transit that much. 8. Lexington, Kentucky. Citywide transit score of 27. Really pretty disappointing given that it is a college town, but why settle for average? We're going to 103 South Limestone, which is basically an office building, but also home of the penthouses at City Center. Not nearly as well marketed as the San Antonio building, but I'm here to tell you, for $4.25 million, you can own a 3-bed, 4-bath condo in the heart of downtown Lexington with a transit score of 76. Look, you can find much more affordable places in downtown Lexington that have great transit access and walkability. I just think it's funny that people pay $4 million to live in an office building in Kentucky. Number 7, a city I don't spend a ton of time talking about, but every time I look at it, it just sets up camp in my head, rent-free. Jacksonville, Florida, citywide transit score of 21, so we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here. But you wouldn't live just any random place in Jacksonville, Florida. No, what you really want is to live right on top of the Jacksonville Skyway, which is basically part of the unholy trinity of low-capacity, fixed guideway downtown circulators, along with the Detroit People Mover and the Miami Metro Mover. Our housing of choice here is the Lofts at La Villa, which is also a stone's throw from the huge transit center at La Villa Station. So you've got tons of access to downtown, but also access to cool, close-in neighborhoods. Every city has them, just like every city organized its urban form around a now-defunct streetcar system, and Jacksonville is no exception. This is Park Street in the Five Points neighborhood, just a bit south of downtown, and I wonder if they've ever thought about just pedestrianizing it. Number 6, speaking of Detroit, citywide transit score of 36, and I talked about this in the recent video where I went to Detroit and spent 4 days getting around the city without a car. There's less spending per capita on transit in Detroit than any other major US city. And let's just take a moment to acknowledge that while there's a lot of logic in having more transit service in the most central, dense parts of your city, the fact that transit scores vary so widely from neighborhood to neighborhood can be seen as an equity issue as well. So in Detroit, you definitely want to be near the People Mover because it's cool. And you want to be near the Rosa Parks Transit Center because you're going to have access to a ton of bus lines. So why not hole up at the Residences at Book Tower, which is not only probably the coolest Art Deco high-rise in the city, but has a transit score rating of 86 and is practically right on top of a People Mover station and the transit center. 5th on the list, Dallas, Texas. Citywide transit score of 39. Pretty terrible for as many DART light rail lines as there are, but Dallas is a pretty sprawling city. You know what though, all that transit converges on downtown, and you can definitely find some locations in the center of the city that grade out at 90. And if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm not really looking for value as much as I'm looking for website splash pages that resonate with my high-end lifestyle aspirations. And the winner here has to be The National at 1401 Elm Street. I mean, if you aren't drinking craft cocktails on a rooftop, eating caviar and having decadent fireside meals with your supermodel friends, I don't know that you can really say you're living life to its fullest. For Charlotte, North Carolina, pretty dreadful citywide transit score rating, 27. And if you look at the urban form of the city broadly, it's fair to say the land use isn't exactly transit supportive. But if you get into the areas where the city is building density, particularly along the Lynx Blue Line, it's like living in a completely different city. Or maybe it's more accurate to say it's more like living in a city at all. The best transit score rating is gonna be uptown, as close to the transit center and the place where the blue and gold lines intersect as you can possibly get. There are tons of places around here where you can get a transit score of 78, and I'll give you the condos at 230 South Tryon as an example, but we are in the era of do your own research now, so have at it. Okay, in a minute I'm gonna get to the top 3, and now that you've seen how all of this is playing out, if you aren't already trying to guess what those top 3 are, then I just don't get you. I won't be mad if you click the screen elements though, especially the bell. Usual ways to connect, and you'll probably hear about things first on my Patreon, including January 31st event in New York, announcement forthcoming, and patrons will get first crack at tickets. Honorable and other kinds of mentions. No Mexico today because WalkScore doesn't see fit to run their analysis on Mexican transit data, which seems like an oversight. And no Canada because the baseline citywide transit scores for Canadian cities are far too high to be able to find a neighborhood that differentiates itself enough. Which raises the point that it's probably a good thing if your city isn't on this list at all. One thing you might have noticed as we go through this, there are actually some ties, like Dallas and Charlotte both have a 51-point differential, and in these cases, I gave the nod to the city with the lower citywide transit score, because that means the proportional difference is higher. But there was actually a 4-way tie for 10th place with a 47-point differential. We already discussed Raleigh at number 10, and the other 3 are Portland, Oregon. Citywide is just a 49, but if you live downtown near where the light rail lines cross at Pioneer Courthouse Square, you can find as high as 96. Los Angeles, citywide is 53, but the transit access downtown just keeps getting better and better because LA is actually building stuff. And you can find some 100s without too much difficulty, although you better have a big trust fund. And Baltimore, also a 53 citywide, and also with close-in locations where you can find 100, maybe even without the trust fund. My definition of a dishonorable mention for this list is a city that has a terrible citywide transit score, and you can't even find a specific location that's that much better. Let's go to the Gulf Coast of Florida, and this is the Northport, Bradenton, Sarasota metro area. I'm not going to call Northport the central city, even though it has the highest population, but just to satisfy your curiosity, Northport's transit score is 5. Like, there's a bus that runs on Highway 41 once an hour between like 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., and that's the weekday service. I'd actually call Sarasota the central city though, and that's a citywide score of 32. Not the worst on this list, but I couldn't find any specific location that had better than a 47. There were actually lots of cities I found like this, and I don't know, maybe they can pat themselves on the back because the terrible transit service they have is equitably distributed. Let's return to the list. Here's another city I got to ground truth in the last year. Houston, Texas. Citywide transit score of 36. But as I pointed out in that video, Houston is geographically quite large, and there's a world of difference between the urban form inside the 610 loop and what you find outside it. Likewise, when it comes to transit, there's a world of difference once you get downtown. I stayed downtown for a few days, and in my opinion, it was pretty solid on its own merits, but you also have access to light rail lines and tons of buses, including what I believe is the state's highest ridership line, the 82 Westheimer. So there's plenty of service to connect you to the amenities of the inner neighborhoods, which are substantial in my opinion. And all told, you can find plenty of locations that grade out at an 88, so take your pick. Number 2, Nashville, Tennessee. Citywide transit score of 22, pretty abysmal, but stay tuned because number 1 is significantly worse. One thing I did here was look at census data to get a feel for how commute mode share matches up with transit score. And the relationship honestly isn't that strong, but Nashville is interesting. Citywide, transit mode share is 1.6% in the most recent 5-year data set, which is terrible, but not much worse than most cities on this list. If I go to the 505 Nashville though, which is the height of luxury apartments in Nashville, Tennessee, I get a transit score of 75, and that zip code has a 6.3% transit mode share. Fascinating city that shows up a lot when I'm researching different kinds of videos. Davidson County did pass a sales tax increase in this month's election to fund transit and other multimodal improvements, so it's definitely high on my list to go check out for myself. I don't know if the same can be said for number 1, Oklahoma City, which I can never truly forgive for stealing the Sonics from Seattle. But for today, OKC gets to be number 1 on a list that I don't know that you want to be number 1 on, but let's look at it. Citywide transit score of 17, worst on this list by a good margin, and the residents of Oklahoma City respond to these dire circumstances by having a transit mode share of 0.4%. To be honest, the mode share in the zip code we're going to isn't much better, but I did find exactly one apartment location that earns a transit score of 70, which just barely puts it into the excellent category. And that's the Lofts at Maywood Park, which has stunning views, just maybe not stunning copy on their website. And frankly, I poked around the area looking for transit service that would qualify as excellent, and it was tough, so if you're in OKC, drop a comment and let me know if this 70 holds water at all, because I don't want a bunch of you to blame me if you watched this video and then decided to move to Oklahoma City. If it seems like roughly half of my videos are about improving your quality of life by seeking out value in unexpected places, then you're probably starting to understand my general approach to life. And that does extend to personal care. Like, here's the thing. Shaving, whether it's your face or whatever, is an inescapable reality of life, and it's one of those things that feels like the less time you spend thinking about it, the better. Like, if you were born after, say, 1970, there's a very good chance your first razor was a multi-blade cartridge or disposable razor, and you haven't spent a lot of time evaluating whether that's really the best option. It's just natural human inertia. You tolerate the skin irritation of a mediocre shave, the absurd ongoing costs you've been bamboozled into, and the billions, that's right, I said billions, of disposable razors that go into landfills every year just in the US alone. Well, today I want to shake up your thinking on this with a personal care item that has changed up the way I treat my skin, and it comes from today's sponsor, Hanson Shaving. So here's the thing. When you buy a cartridge or a disposable razor, the blades often aren't supported or stabilized well, which means the blade is going to vibrate and flex, which leads to skin irritation and mediocre results. Think of anything else you'd cut with, like scissors or a good kitchen knife. The last thing you want is for a kitchen knife to flex while you're trying to cut with it. Same idea. The Hanson razor, though, it is super precise. It's a safety razor that's built to very tight tolerances, securing the blade at a 30-degree angle with 27 microns of blade exposure, which is going to give you an optimal shave. Also, there's no plastic involved, including the packaging, and a Hanson razor is really the opposite of disposable. It's built to last a lifetime. And this part is important. Hanson is not a subscription service, so they're not trying to send you monthly cartridge shipments. Instead, Hanson's idea is you have one really good safety razor, and then blades that cost next to nothing. The blades for the Hanson run about 10 cents compared to $2 to $4 each for cartridges, so it only takes about 6 months for the Hanson to come out ahead, and it's all gravy from there on out. And the other thing I love about Hanson, they have a pandemic origin story, just like this channel does. In 2020, the pandemic forced their family-run aerospace machine shop to pivot in a new direction. And now they make these incredible razors in a machine shop in Canada that also made parts for the Mars rover and the International Space Station. And that's really a big key to what they do. Their machinists are exceptional, and that level of precision is one of the big reasons the Hanson razor is so much gentler on your skin. What I want you to take away from this is, you don't need a 5-blade cartridge with a moisturizing strip. You just need a single-blade safety razor that's extraordinarily well engineered. The Hanson razor is already an amazing value, but if you use my code at checkout, they'll include some quality shaving cream in your order. So if you want a great shave with a very cool space-age safety razor that will save you money year after year, go to hansonshaving.com/CityNerd and enter CityNerd at checkout. Your face, or whatever it is you're shaving, will thank me. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining today, and thanks as always to the patrons for your direct support and the conversations we have on Patreon, which I do find really valuable. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode next week, and I'll see you then.